Alright, so I'm an optimist, and in this video, I'm going to present some ways to solve many of the issues going on in PvP, and yes, it is in the hopes that someone who can actually enact these changes sees it. But it's also to give the community some direction. In theory, the developers should listen to the community, so if we ask for something together, ideally they would consider reasonable requests. I want to emphasize reasonable requests. I don't want this to turn into some kind of spiraling wish list of things that cost a lot of development time and money. Would I love a faction warfare galaxy map where battles are fought to capture systems with an always changing front line? Absolutely. That would be awesome, but it's never going to happen, so why bother talking about it? I see a lot of Reddit and Discord comments with grandiose ideas that sure would be great in another game, or maybe far in the future, but we have to work within the limitations of STO and what resources Cryptic has as a developer. And my last comment before we get into it, these ideas come from nearly 7,500 hours of playing this game, and yes, I'm slightly embarrassed by that number, along with my 7 or so years experience working as a software engineer. Obviously, I don't know the exact tools and processes at Cryptic, but I think with my experience, I can make some feasible suggestions. I'm getting very tired of seeing comments made by players whose total PvP experience is barely 10 minutes a year during the arena endeavor. Many times, these comments only serve to show just how poorly they understand the mechanics of the game. But at face value, to someone scrolling Reddit or Twitter or whatever, their comments and mine both carry equal weight. That's also why I'm not going to ask for anything like damage reductions, slowing ships down, or anything weird like that, which would only appeal to the newest, least skilled of PvP players. Whether by luck or intent, the balance as far as survivability versus damage happens to be on a nearly equal footing at the high end, and that's awesome, so don't change that. I can post guides for every ship in the game, but as they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The game should not be rebalanced to cater to players who utterly refuse to learn and improve at their builds. I'm going to list these ideas in what I think is the easiest to most difficult, but also keeping in mind the impact it would have on the game. Even if we only got 1 or 2 of these ideas implemented, I'd consider it a huge win for the game as a whole. Number 1, rewards for participating in PvP matches. This is an easy one because even in-game, if I go to the competitive marks, competitive thing and click on info, and then I do where can I earn competitive marks, it even says you can earn competitive marks by completing any PvP match. I don't understand what the holdup has been all this time. Just assign competitive marks or fleet marks to the loot table for completing a PvP match and make the minimum be 15 kills. Just like a TFO, or better yet, give a stratagem to the winning team like a competitive TFO. I understand players might abuse this system to farm marks, but really, I mean, people are out here AFKing Counterpoint, Defensive Starbase 1, Pavo Ground, and others, and nothing's really been done about that. There'll always be players who find a way to abuse the system, and fixing what I assume is a bug, based on this, that there aren't any rewards for arena matches, would be a net improvement to the game and give people an actual motivation to participate and improve at PvP matches. Number 2, matchmaking and team balance. Years ago, an article was released called The Player Potential System. The idea was that the more PvP matches you played, it would assign a value to your character, and when queuing up for arenas or competitive TFOs, it would split up the teams based on that value. I'm not sure about the comp TFOs, but this was never implemented for arenas, and I can say that with 100% certainty. And I'm going to lift the veil a little bit here, but when you queue up for the arena solo duo queues, the game just launches the match in the order that you queue up in. So the first 5 players to queue will be on Team 1, and the second 5 players are on Team 2. That's it. Nothing about their player potential, captain career, or ship type is taken into account whatsoever. I would love a more fully featured matchmaker, but at this point, even a random scramble would be better than nothing, or at the very least, split up the teams based on captain career. There should never be a match where one team has multiple science captains and the other team has none. So there's your easy version of a fix. Split the teams evenly based on captain career. The hard thing about any kind of matchmaker is that traits, gear, etc. can all be changed during the match, and it should stay that way. Sometimes adjustments have to be made mid-match, and that's one of the best things about PvP, seeing what the enemy is using and then adapting your build to fight that. But because of that, we can't do something where you scan the ship, traits, and gear and try to split the teams up based on their ship builds, because builds can change during the match, and people would abuse that system anyway. However, the ship itself can't be changed, and you can make some build assumptions based on that. For example, a tactical captain in an escort, it's not too hard to figure out that that player is going to try to be dealing traditional damage, like with beams, cannons, or torpedoes, to win the match. So in addition to splitting the teams generally based on career, include the ship type in that calculation and actually do the potential system as described, where wins and losses for a character are saved, some kind of percentage or something. Let me put up on the screen a sample PvP match's participants and a formula of how to split them up for a better fight. Obviously, even with a matchmaker, not every match is going to be even, but that's just the nature of any PvP game, especially one like this, where you only participate in one match at a time. Other games, like Counter-Strike or Battlefield, for example, have the advantage of most players staying for multiple rounds, so the system can easily split them for the next round, or after a death partway through a round, and so on. STO doesn't work like that, so it's not an option for us. It's more like Rocket League. In Rocket League, players have different tiers, and they're split based on that, but every once in a while you go into a Rocket League match, and your team is just awful, and the other team is way better than you, and you kind of just have to deal with it. There's nothing you can do. So here's 10 players in the order they might queue up today in game. If it splits up the teams like that, I think it's pretty clear to anyone familiar with PvP who's going to win before it even starts. I mean, Team 1 would have to play their worst game ever to lose this match. And a player like Player 10, clearly someone new to PvP, is definitely in for a bad time. So first thing, let's split them up based on the career. So now it looks like this. That's definitely better, but still not great. Team 1 has a noticeable advantage. Now, if we split up the ships a little, I know I used really easy ones here, but even if we just categorize the ships broadly, that's fine. Internally, just split the ships into, say, 4 categories: science, escort, cruiser, and carriers. Obviously, it's more nuanced than that, but at least it's something. Alright, so that ended up moving Player 7, a tactical captain in a science vessel, down to Team 2. That forced a player from Team 2 to be moved up back to Team 1. In this case, it had to be a tactical captain to keep the careers evenly split, so Player 9 was moved to Team 1. Preference should be given to science captains in PvP for splitting teams, since science is the most powerful in a team play environment by far, so in mismatched teams like pug matches, those have to stay as true as possible. In this case, it worked out because there are 4 science captains in this sample size, but it won't necessarily be perfectly balanced every time. We're already looking a lot better. Good teamwork could have either team win or lose this match, but the advantage still kind of goes to Team 1 now looking at the win-loss ratio. Total matches played increases the confidence level of that rating, so let's do one final shuffle based on that win-loss ratio to even things up. Now that is going to be a great match. The top 2 performing science captains in science ships were split up, so Player 3 had to be moved to Team 1, also a science captain in a science ship, but with fewer matches played and a lower win ratio. The tactical captains stay the same, but that's because their win ratios are reasonably close, and the Player 8, who has a lot of matches played with a positive win ratio, is paired up with one player with a much lower confidence level and a losing record. The engineers are difficult. Player 6 has more matches played and a winning ratio, while Player 10 is newer and has a losing ratio, but this is as close as it's going to get. Like I said, the point is simply shuffling like this is good enough to make any match closer, but every match is not going to be 15 to 14 or something like that. Without a matchmaker, every match might be like the first iteration, which would have Team 1 winning every single time. One last check to run: if we add up both teams' win-loss values and compare them, they're pretty close. Team 1 has a 2.6 combined, and Team 2 has a 2.25. Team 1 still has a slight advantage to win here, but it's not much, especially compared to how we started with Team 1 at 2.85 and Team 2 only at 2.0. These values are relative to the value 2.5, which would be an ideal value if all 5 members of each team had an exact 50% win-loss ratio. That value is just for proof of concept. I wouldn't make any team adjustments after the win-loss ratio compared between captains of the same career that we did in the previous step. So to summarize, split teams with 3 logic checks. First, split captain careers. Second, split up the ship types, but don't override decisions made by the first check. And third, split based on win-loss ratios, but don't override choices made by the other checks. And instantly you have closer matches, more even matches, more fun for everyone involved. Number 3, spawn protection. This one's easy. Change the arena maps and Karat Warzone to include a spawn protected area. I would like this to work where you spawn inside of a starbase, and while you're within it, you're immune to damage and negative effects, but can't fire weapons or activate anomaly abilities or anything like that that exits the starbase. Once you exit the starbase, you cannot re-enter and you're in the battle. Equip the starbase itself with high damage weaponry and make sure it has enough perception to target and attack stealth ships, but not so much damage that it's a one-shot kill like in the competitive TFOs. Basically, you have a starbase which has, say, a 20-kilometer range bubble around it where there's an advantage for the defending team. That means if someone flies out, attacks, then turns tail and runs back towards their starbase, they can still be chased and finished off and can't just hide in their base the whole time. It would also solve complaints about spawn camping and all the stupidity that goes along with it. I'm on a cap and hold match right now, and I'm just going to show what I mean because there are starbases in cap and hold, just not in arena or Karat. My starbase is over on the other side, that's where I spawned, and this is the enemy starbase. If I fly closer to it, all of these turrets and torpedoes will start attacking me. In theory. There we go. The problem is they do such little damage that, I mean, I'm not even using any heal abilities or anything, and, you know. This is such low damage that it doesn't matter. If I wanted to kill the, if I wanted to kill another enemy player, it would be very easy in here because, well, there is a tractor beam, so that's pretty annoying. But basically, I like the idea a lot. But what they should do is have this enemy ship spawn inside of like a shuttle bay or a ship bay or something inside the base that I can't attack them until they fly out. Once they're out, they're out. Then these turrets and things, have them deal more damage and be more effective. Maybe give them a range further than 10 kilometers so that there's a wider bubble. Then then basically, if that player flies out and attacks me, I can chase them down and keep shooting at them, but I don't have to worry about, you know, I'm at a disadvantage now chasing them. And the other thing is to make these turrets invulnerable because it's pretty easy to... especially if I had AoE abilities like a science captain, it's pretty easy to destroy these things. So now all those turrets are dead, so what are you going to do now, you know? But I like the idea here. It's just not fully implemented, but I feel like it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to make it happen. Number 4, logout timers. Add a timer for logging out while you're within a PvP zone, arena, or war zone, and have this timer reset whenever you activate abilities or take damage. It could be as short as just 10 seconds, But sadly, there are a few bad eggs when it comes to PvP who like to just log out right before a death. It seems obvious, since so many MMOs have a feature like this, to prevent exactly this type of griefing and cheating. And I'm going to demonstrate here. If I attack this ship, and that player logs out, or changes character, they just disappear. There's no penalty to the other team, no death is counted, nothing. Number 5, scoreboard glitches. I'm not exactly sure why this happens, but there seem to be a few things that cause a death to appear next to the player's minus column in a match, but it doesn't add to the total number of deaths for the team, or kills for the other team. This means that some matches have the wrong final score compared to the actual number of player deaths. Clearly, the total number of defeats is not being added up correctly at the end of a match, and there's some kind of broken relationship in the code there that someone has to find and correct. Here's an example screenshot of a match that I was in. The blue team lost 15-14. However, if we look at the total number of deaths for each team, red team had 17 deaths and should have lost this match. I've seen this happen quite a few times. It seems tied to abilities like temporal backstep or continuity. Either way, if a death is recorded in the minus column, it should record the corresponding kill for the other team, no matter how it happened, so hopefully that's an easy solution. Number 6. Every ability that scales up in duration or intensity with a skill, make the same skill resist it correctly. Additionally, make all debuff effects cleanable with non-specialist bridge officer abilities. This one will take some elaboration to make it clear what I'm getting at. I say correctly because according to the skill tree tooltips and even official release notes, most infamously now the Intel revamp notes, there are a lot of things in the game that are not subject to control resistances or drain resistances, and worse, now there are even things that can't be cleared by any ability. Let me give an example of one that's done correctly. Scramble sensors. As an attacker, higher control expertise increases the duration of the confuse effect. As the recipient, higher control expertise reduces the duration, and resistance is twice as effective as increasing it, so it essentially becomes a tug of war with the advantage favoring the defending ship. That's actually done really well, and it's one of the things I point to when I say there's so much potential here for a great PvP game. To make it even better, the effect can be ended instantly by using Science Team, which clears all science debuffs, including the confuse effect from Scramble. So I'm going to do an example really quick. My opposing ship here has Scramble Sensors 1, which confuses me, according to the tooltip on that ship, for 11.1 seconds. When I'm hit by Scramble, it doesn't actually last 11 seconds, because I have control skill that resists it. I'm actually working on another video specifically about debuff effects and clearing them as part of my survivability series, but I also want to mention that it would help to clearly define what counts as a science, engineering, or tactical debuff. Some of them make sense, but not all. As a rule of thumb, science debuffs are anything with a confuse, drain, or something that originates from a science power, like the damage resistance debuff from destabilizing resonance beam. All of those are cleared by the defender using Science Team, and that's good game design. Okay, let me give an example of one that's done incorrectly. I've already talked evade target lock to death, so I'm going to pick something different. In this case, concentrate firepower. That doesn't scale up with anything, so the attacking ship doesn't need any point investment whatsoever to get the most out of it. That's fine. I think that gives players the options to build a ship with lower skill point investment and keep some debuff effects, and more varied builds keeps the game exciting. However, concentrate firepower isn't cleared by anything, so once concentrate is used against you, the only way to get rid of it is one of the two catch-all debuff removers. And here I'll demonstrate. Concentrate firepower is used against me. There it is. And if I use engineering team, science team, tactical team, Rally point marker? No, I mean, nothing clears it. I'm negatively affected by that no matter what. For those that don't know already, the catch-all debuff removers are the command spec Boost Morale, which can be used every 60 seconds and clears all debuffs of any type, and the Warp Core Engineer Duty Officer that has a chance to clear all debuffs when using an emergency power ability. That was a lot of setup, but I've already done most of the work. I've tested almost every ability that applies a debuff and confirmed both what clears it and if it's subject to control or drain resistances. I'll link the spreadsheet in the description. But here's an easy fix. Go in and anything that has none in the countered by column, choose whichever team ability makes sense and make it clear that debuff. The harder part is finding things that scale up with control and drain X and then making sure that they scale back down for the recipient. If you only touch a single ability on this list, please, for goodness sakes, fix evade target lock. It's been almost 3 months now. One other thing. Any debuff needs to be cleared by a non-specialist team ability. This is not a problem right now, but I'm just bringing it up for the future. For example, the Gather Intel mechanic of full Intel ships. Gather Intel debuff is only cleared by Intel team. This means if you aren't flying an Intel ship, you have no way of clearing this debuff. That's not a good design choice. I'm not saying every ship should be able to do everything, but when it comes to debuffs, yes, they should be able to clear all debuffs. Number 7. Untargetable abilities, stealth, and the lack of drawbacks and ability for any ship to participate. Look, there's a ton of potential here. Players want to fly the ships that they like or remember on screen, just like in PvE. However, when abilities are introduced that make some ships completely untargetable or increase their stealth to the point that they cannot be countered except by extremely specialized ships and so on, it takes away from that idea. Let me center this conversation on Intel abilities, but those aren't the only problems, just the most obvious. Intelligence team to start. This ability gives you stealth, during which you can continue to fire weapons, use abilities, and otherwise fly your ship as normal. I understand not everything has to be based in reality or lore. I mean, it's just a video game, but come on. Only rare, specialized ships can fire while cloaked. So this ability allows any ship in the entire game with an Intel seat to do the same thing with 90% uptime. That just doesn't make sense. And to make matters worse, the stealth it grants can't be stripped by anything. Sure, if someone is stuck inside a gravity well, then they can't activate the ability, but why can't it be activated 10 kilometers away and they can fly straight through the middle of a gravity well or even right through a charged particle burst and they don't get decloaked? By contrast, a ship using a traditional cloaking device, if they get too close to a gravity well, hit with a charged particle burst, or any other ability that breaks cloak, they lose the stealth effect and become visible and targetable. So why wouldn't Intel Team work the same way? I'm not trying to rag on Intel Team users, I use it plenty myself. However, it should be an ability that's used at the right time to escape from trouble or give yourselves a few moments to avoid incoming fire. Instead, it's used as an always-on ability, constantly cycled for near invulnerability, except against players that know how to deal with it. That leaves 2 ways to counter Intel Team. Either all of your damage must be dealt in the 1-second activation window, or you have to raise perception high enough to attack even if they have Intel Team active, which brings me to my first major complaint. In order to have enough perception, you have to have at least a pilot or an Intel seat, or both. Because, stupidly, the counter to Intel Team is Intel Team. Yes, that's right, Intel Team grants perception as well as stealth, both sides of the same coin. So basically, if you're in a ship without Intel or pilot, it's not possible to have enough perception to target, and since Intel Team stays active no matter what once activated, there's no way to combat it for most ships in the game. So a couple of solutions to this problem, and I'd say one or all of these could be implemented in combination. First solution, the trait Fresh from R&R, which allows team abilities to be activated every 10 seconds. Just make it only apply to non-specialist team abilities. This would keep debuff cleansing teams available, like Science Team, Tactical Team, Engineering Team, but it stops Intel Team from being activated every 10 seconds on a spam, and makes a wider gap for damage to be dealt because it would be every 9 seconds of stealth every 15, so there's a 6-second window now. People will still use Fresh from R&R, and people will still use Intel Team with this change, and dev work-wise, it's really easy to implement. Second idea, make the Stealth Intel Team grants go away when you're affected by something that would normally decloak you. This is a bit harder to do from a programming perspective, I'm sure, but if flying through a gravity well, or getting hit by a charged particle burst, or brushing up against a plasma emission cloud would decloak a cloak ship, it should also strip the stealth as long as Intel Team's stealth is increased by the same skills that increase cloaking stealth. And I really want to focus on that last line, and it brings me to the third option. Intel Team grants stealth, and that stealth amount is increased by Infiltrator and Pirate buffs and the stealth choice in the skill tree and Exodus, and all things that conceivably should be used to increase cloaking stealth. The problem is that stacking all of those sources of stealth is easy with basically no drawbacks, which is how players are able to get stealth numbers as high as 5,700 or more. On the other hand, and back to the tug of war analogy, increasing perception requires a lot of sacrifices, and on ships that don't have intel or pilot for Intel Team and Lambda respectively, you may as well not even bother because you'll never have more perception than someone stacking stealth. So do one of two things. Either make it so that Intel Team stealth does not stack with other sources except maybe Exodus, or make it so that the abilities that grant perception grant more of it, so it's actually possible to target Intel Team users up to a reasonable distance. This means increase the stealth from emergency power to auxiliary, or increase the perception granted by aux power, or increase, when you look at the Jem'Hadar deflector and it says 2.5% stealth detection, make that 5% stealth detection, or some way to increase the amount of perception available for all ships, not just Intel and pilot ships. I could do an hour-long deep dive on stealth, but just keep in mind these constants. Perception is the opposite of stealth. Stealth has a range fall-off of about 50 per kilometer. This means if someone uses a stealth ability, Intel Team or Cloak, whatever, getting physically closer to them will allow you to see them up to a point. If they have higher stealth than you have perception, you'll never see them even if your ships are physically touching each other. The key from a developer perspective is to find the right balance, because the way it works is a good mechanic that introduces piloting skill into PvP. However, at the moment, it's too easy to stack multiple sources of stealth, and there's not an easy way to stack enough perception in contrast. One more ability to mention in this category, Evade Target Lock. We usually talk about the disable part on this channel because that's a really big issue, but there's actually another problem. When someone uses ETL, it makes them 100% completely and absolutely untargetable, as in a binary on-off, against everyone on the other team, not just the person you use ETL against. This is not countered by perception or anything else because it's not a debuff against enemies, it's a self-buff for the user. I would really hesitate to set any kind of infinite Boolean value like that on any ability, PvE or PvP. Considering that untargetable time is increased with control skill, it's really ridiculous. Luckily, ETL can only be used every 30 seconds, but still that means I can use an ability that essentially means, with enough control skill, I will never get attacked for 10 or more seconds every 30. Coupled with Intel Team together, that's really ridiculous. In fact, I think the untargetable time must be a mistake because ETL also applies a damage reduction to whoever you use it against, which is completely worthless because they can't target you anyway. No one can because you're untargetable. So for that one, really the untargetable part should just be removed completely, but if you insist on keeping it there, at least make it grant stealth or something that at least has some kind of counter where it's possible to overcome it in certain situations. And one last one for this topic, the Troyes protocol console from the DaVinci. I just wanted to give another example of a Boolean on-off value that shouldn't exist. When you use this console, the second half of the effect says stealthed. This doesn't actually grant a stealth value, it makes your ship invisible and untargetable with infinite stealth for 8 seconds. This means it's not possible to counter in any way, so why do that? Have it grant 5,000 stealth or 5,500 stealth or something the same way consoles like hull image refractors work, for example. At least there would be a counter in that case. Number 8. Red gravity well, pet spawning, and other spam tactics. This one is more of a problem to newer players, but it's worth covering anyway. I said the game shouldn't be balanced for low-end PvP, but for high-end play, and I still hold to that. However, Temporal Anchor, better known as Red Gravity Well, has a problem, and that is that it can stack and it isn't cleared by anything. One Red Gravity Well is not really a problem. A 20% chance for a little cooldown tick is a small annoyance, but it's not broken or overpowered, just a way to make things harder for your enemies. However, if 5 players put Red Gravity Well down and they all start counting individually, and to make matters worse, even aftershock gravity wells have the same effect with this trait enabled. That's why in certain situations it's not uncommon to see abilities that should have a 30-second cooldown with cooldown timers up in the minutes. So 2 ways to fix it. Either drastically lower the chance of the cooldown proc, or better yet, stop it from stacking more than a certain number of times. I really think the best way to do it would be to leave the proc chance alone and set it to only stack, say, 3 times maximum, up to 60%. That would change the balance of the optimal PvP team setup a little bit and add some variation to the builds you might see in a match. Instead of the best team arrangement being 5 Red Gravity Well spammers, it would make those builds still useful as control builds, but it wouldn't make sense to have too many of them because it would be superfluous. Another thing, Red Gravity Well isn't cleared by anything, so it's not an easy fix. Hazard emitters, for example, clears the effect, but it's instantly reapplied every second. So if you're caught inside a pile of Red Gravity Wells and you somehow manage to activate hazard emitters, it won't matter because it just keeps instantly reapplying. I think it would take some work to fix this the way that the game is programmed, but I'd be just as happy to see Red Grav have a proper counter, as in something that makes you immune to the effect of Red Gravity Well, like if you activate hazard emitters during that 15 seconds that hazard emitters is active, make you actually immune to the effects of gravity wells and the cooldown proc of Temporal Anchor. Red Grav is probably the worst one, but pet spam is also pretty bad, but specifically paired with the trait Feel the Weight of Our Presence, which appears to have no limits on stacks despite the tooltip saying otherwise. This is more of a Karat problem than an arena one, but I definitely think either Feel the Weight or what counts as a pet for it needs to be looked at and either optimized or slowed down. This also includes the pet swarm modes on the Section 31 starships that make the targeting rectical for them 10 kilometers in size. I don't understand why this happens, but considering yet another ship has been introduced with a swarm mechanic, I'd really like to see it fixed. And the problem isn't the number of pets on screen. I know newer players might struggle to target players through all the pets, but all you have to do, like my previous videos say, is just go and turn off auto target of pets and problem solved there. So that's a player issue. From a development or game mechanic perspective, the problem is that when there are a lot of pets on screen and the trait feel the weight of our presence is equipped by multiple people, the game engine lags. And not the actual game itself, the server engine lags when feel the weight is being applied with multiple pets. And I'll show an example of that here of a Karat fight that I was in where I'm running the game between 30 and 60 frames a second, but the game engine itself is clearly not processing things correctly. Anyway, the pet thing is really only a problem in those big 20-player Karat fights, and I haven't seen it too terribly in arenas, although I'm sure a 5-man team of pet spammers could make it pretty bad there too if that was their intention. I don't really have an easy solution for that one though, since it's about engine optimization than anything else, and I know that's probably harder to fix than anything else that I listed in this game or in this video. Alright, well that's all I have right now. I would love to make some other suggestions, but many of them would require a lot more effort, and it doesn't really make sense to make any big, sweeping changes to PvP with it being such a small part of the game. If the ideas I mentioned here got implemented, I think we'd see an increase in PvP action, and hopefully players would be more interested in learning how to participate in PvP, because there'd actually be some motivation to do so, and it would be better balanced. I know this video is going to be long already, but I want to take a really short detour into ideas I would love to see, but are further in the future. I think a territory mode would be cool. Let the Fed and KDF factions play in war zones around multiple planets and connect them with a lattice system. Allow either faction to capture planets connected via that lattice like a territory war. I also think it would be cool to see a few different game types either introduced in arenas or in those new war zones around the different planets. For example, a capture the flag mode, or modify capture and hold so the bases actually have names or letters so teams can coordinate, like go capture point A or go capture the shipyard or something, instead of just generic, capture point icons that are hard to, we've done competitive cap and hold matches and it's impossible other than the middle starbase. When you say to someone, hey, go capture, and then you trail off and you say, whatever that one is called at the far end, because they don't have names. How are you supposed to tell your team what to do? Anyway. And I'm going to jump over real quick to another game, MechWarrior Online, which I used to play a lot years ago. This game is also free to play, and you earn credits from participating in matches to buy more mechs and gear, similar to earning gear and ships in STO. However, this game also has a selection of trial mechs. These mechs are fully equipped, curated mechs that anyone can use if they choose to fill a gap in their roster, or if they just want to try something different. There are disadvantages to using the trial mechs, but the idea is great. In this game, if all I own is a light mech, say I'm brand new to the game, and I want to try out a heavy mech for a match, I can use a trial mech temporarily until I earn enough money to buy my own. The same could be applied to STO. Allow players to use a trial ship already built for PvP matches, but do not restrict players from using their own ships. This would require input from the community, I'm sure, to get good builds, but I'd be happy to supply the builds for this sort of thing. Let players choose from, say, 5 different PvP builds, try out some gear maybe they don't own yet, and if they experience PvP in a decent ship, they'll likely want to customize and improve on it and start working towards a ship of their own. It's a win all around for both the players and for Cryptic. Alright, that's all I have. Thanks for watching.